Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. I'm up to date on the audio drama Bridgewater, and I've got a theory. Now, I've mentioned this theory in my blog, but I'm not sure if I put it across well. Let's see if I can do it any better now. My theory is that when people go across to the other side, I'll call it that for now, because I don't want to give too much away, but I'm guessing that in this show, that their physical bodies die on this side, and on the other side, they have another physical body. So, it's possible that, without giving too much away, the person that has come back from that other side now has two physical bodies on this side. The one that was left behind when they went over there, and the one that they've come back with. So it's entirely feasible with that sort of logic that that could cause a problem. Stu World Order saw Stu and his guest Robert talking about the classic anime film Ghost in the Shell. And, well, it's a classic. How else can I say that? I don't need to go any further with what I've written down here. It's a classic film. It's questionable in places looking back on it, but, you know, it is what it is. It was a classic back then, and there's excellent bits about it and maybe some questionable things here and there. Yeah. Naked people in anime is still a weird thing to see. And the Create Magic episodes that I listened to on that night were all from October of last year. So Todd Purse was talking about the Inktober Artist Challenge that he was going through for that month. Friday, March the 3rd, 2023. I can't believe I only wrote notes out for this pod for 3 things on the Thursday. Oh well. Believe me, there's more to come. So Friday, March 3rd, 2023. I listened to an episode of Podcast X that I'd actually added to my list either a week or two beforehand. The episode was from February the 24th, and it saw Rob, Ben and Kofi. Yep, Kofi from Comic Book Nation. Except this time in Podcast X, Kofi can get away with bad language and, you know, giving his whole self, essentially, all in. And they were talking about Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. A film that, if I'm being honest, my opinion keeps changing, not necessarily for the best about. And I would probably stick at a 6 out of 10 now for the film, possibly rising up to a 6.5, because I don't want people to think it's mediocre. There's some excellent bits in the film. It's just, there's a lot in it that's like, I don't know really how to explain what was going on that, that bothered me. Anyway, I listened to the first episode of Film versus Film, which was from November 2020, which is I've followed them for a while on the socials, and eventually I'm getting round to them. Eventually I'll get round to a lot of people's shows, but, it's a lot of shows to listen to. But this one, they were putting the 2 films. I've got to work out how I'm going to pronounce this so it doesn't come out as the naughty word. So it was from November 2020, and they were talking about Quentin Tarantino films, and they were discussing what were their 2 favourite films. one of them, the favourite film was Pulp Fiction, and the other one, their favourite of Quentin Tarantino's films, was Inglourious Bastards. See how I said that, so it didn't come across as the naughty word. My answer to that is, you're both wrong. The best film by Quentin Tarantino is Jackie Brown. That film has got a superb cast and a great story that is just fabulous. It's a really good film. There was a fascinating chat that Gates McFadden had with William Shatner on her show Investigate. You see, the show's title is a pun on her name, Investigates, and they talked about all sorts, spoke about a lot of stuff, including, obviously both of them have been in different Star Trek versions. Gates was in The Next Generation, and she's in this third season of Picard, which I'll be starting very soon, where the majority of the Next Generation cast have returned. And they went into it was interesting because it wasn't just her asking Bill questions, but Bill was asking her questions as well, because he got to a point where he was saying, look, I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to ask you a question, and he was asking her questions, and I just found it an interesting conversational show as opposed to a chat show where it was this person asks a question, that person answers them, etc., and it goes like that. Right. What else have we got? Comic Book Nation saw spoilers for Season 3 of The Mandalorian, which I'll have forgotten by the time I get to watching Season 3 of Mandalorian, because I've only just started watching the Book of Boba Fett, which I've got to watch before I can watch Season 3 of Mandalorian, because The Mandalorian follows on from that, apparently. There's bits that I need, for me to know what's going on. They also discussed the film We Have a Ghost, which me and Louise watched on Netflix the previous week and absolutely loved. Actually, we'd listened to it about 3 days before, watched it about 3 days before, in 2 sittings. That tells you what life is like at the moment, having to watch films over 2 or 3 sittings. Been doing that for a while now. And finally, talking about today, about that day of podcast listening, Bill looked at the 2021 film Dune in Bill Reads Bad Reviews, a show that doesn't seem to be getting any reviews itself. I mean, as in, Bill Reads Bad Reviews, the podcast. And all I've got to say about that is, look, listen to the show and leave a review for it, because it's a fantastic show, it's original, and there's nothing else like it out there. Alright. Saturday, March the 4th, 2023. I started Season 2 of the Blood on the Tracks podcast, which Season 2 is about John Lennon, and the first episode was about John and Yoko. It's interesting, but sometimes you think to yourself, where did they get the information from? And is all of it accurate, or is some of it poetic license, so to speak, or just a bit of, we make this up to, because this is what they might have said, or what might have happened, or exact. I think there's a bit of conjecture sometimes in these biopic type things. Rachel and Dave spoke about Creed 3 in the podcast What We Just Watched, where I found out something that is still bugging me. Sylvester Stallone does not appear as Rocky in the film, and he's not actually in the film at all. Now, I know it's a Creed film, but in the previous 2 films, even though I've not seen the second one, but I do know, Rocky was, Michael B. Jordan's trainer, coach, in, his trainer in those films. But in this third film, apparently, he's not in there, the character, and he's not mentioned at all. Which, I mean, they could have even just done a line of like, oh, Rocky's, not available, blah, 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 this, that, and the other, and that, which bugs me. I mean, eventually we will get round to watching the second Creed and then this third one at some point. Eventually. Times at premium at the moment, and has been for a long while. Where are we now? I listened to episode 0, as they called it, of the Partially Examined Life, which has been going for years. Wow, I'm surprised. I'd heard it advertised or promoted on, was it Daily Dad Jokes podcast? I think they were promoting this. So I gave that episode 0 a listen, and it's a show about psychology. And the first episode was just an introduction to the host and their backgrounds, and the fact that they're going to just look at psychology from they all had backgrounds. They all met actually training, in class where they all were learning about psychology anyway. But they do it in a way that's not, yeah, I don't know what to say, but, it's not, professional speak, it's everyday man speak, apparently. What else was I going to say? I won't go into the podcast heard this, because I feel bad enough that I ranted about it as much as I did in the blog. And quite frankly, that was actually edited, what I put in the blog. I took a heck of a lot out of there that I responded, because I got really riled by somebody saying, oh, these are ridiculous lyrics, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. And it's almost like a lot of people just want media and art spoon-fed so they don't have to actually think about things or look at things outside of the box. They just want lyrics that, boy meets girl, I love you, you love me, this is how we met, blah blah blah, we're still in love, blah blah blah, or we fell apart, blah blah blah, this, that and the other, and none of this, wordplay and this, that and the other. A lot of people don't like that sort of thing, obviously. They just keep their minds close to it. And I've gone on about this too long, and I've basically rehashed what I took out of the original there. To listen to the show Good School, I had to go to their website. But I did enjoy this first episode, and I hope that at one point they'll be able to get it onto players at some time, so it can be played on, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Podcast, and any other podcast thing, Good Pods, all this, that and the other. Because I think that there's a great market out there for shows that are for younger people. Because I listen to Sanjida Says, which I see as a good podcast for young adults or older teenagers at some point. Well, yeah, I'd say Sanjida is a good show for people between the ages of say 14 and probably 21. But there's all sorts of shows. I mean, I will at some point go into Teen Talk with Nifemi as well at some point and explain and go into that probably, because I've been listening to that as well. Why did I put it that way? The episode of Tracing Owls that I listened to was a great roundtable discussion, which I've already mentioned in my diary episode that came out on I called it a diary episode that came out on Sunday to cover for the lack of a standard episode. Word of warning, you'll probably get that again this Sunday, because I haven't got an episode to fall back on, but I do have some recording next week happening. Fingers crossed that I booked. Hopefully they won't cancel, or it won't have to be postponed, because I don't want to keep shortchanging the show's premise by putting these diary things in on Sundays as well. But yeah, the episode of Tracing Owls I listened to was a great roundtable discussion where Vuk, the presenter, was joined by the artist Todd Purse, Jonathan Dodd, and Easton Hawke. Todd also does the superb daily podcast Create Magic that I listen to, where he talks about the art he creates each day, and he also has longer form episodes where he chats with guests. Anyway, to go off the tangent and back into what we're talking about with Tracy Knowles, this episode saw them discussing art that's created by artificial intelligence, which is called artificial imaging. Fascinating subject, and it does bring to mind something interesting, because at one point they were saying that how it could be helpful, they were saying, is sort of like suggesting to people something that they could base their own artwork on, as opposed to what some people are doing, which is producing that artwork created by artificial intelligence that they've just put in like parameters and said, oh, I want it to be a picture of a frog with this, that and the other, blah blah blah, in a swamp, this, that and the other, and then the artificial intelligence produces that for them with them doing nothing else, and then they go, this is my artwork. No, it isn't. But but at the same time, it brought to mind years and years ago when synthesizers first were used in music, in pop music or any sort of music. People were suggesting that was cheating, because people were just letting the synthesizer do what they could, which was like, no, you have to still play a keyboard on there, so you've still got your fingers on playing the keys on the keyboard to play those notes on a synthesizer, so it's still creative. But you pick the sound on the synthesizer, or back in the day when they first used synthesizers, you used the oscillators and all these other switches to be able to turn around to create the sound that you wanted. So you're creating a sound there, and then you create what notes are played by playing them on a keyboard that back then was connected to that. There weren't, over the years they became integrated, the actual board with the oscillators and the keyboard device itself. Although personally I use a keyboard device for doing things, and then I have external processors and sound modules and software that I have sounds or tones on, and then I play the keyboard to put the music in when I do my own music. Anyway, that's going too far with that. And I also then listened to the penultimate episode of On the Night Train, and I've yet to listen to the final episode. I think the whole show is great for the most part. There's certain bits that niggle me, but for the most part, it's a fantastic series, and I really like what the Merry Beggars production team do. Anyway, I'll leave that there for now. Thanks for listening. Take care.